Much of the scholarship that I began looking at with regard to war was really about kind of what traditional military historians call drum and bugle history. I was much more interested in looking at how war affected people and how individuals experienced war and what the long-term implications of war experience were. I found that also somewhat frustrating because the emphasis was really on the male experience. And that, to me, left out an entire part of the human population, women, who were also very much impacted by the experiences of war. So I wanted to know what their roles were and how their actions in war were perceived and whether or not that had any implications or effect on their positions in society. When I was in high school, I actually had the benefit of being at a school that taught Russian language, but my parents didn't let me take it because I had started with French and they said, you have to finish with French. But my friends would surreptitiously teach me Russian words, especially the bad words. And then they went on a trip to Russia, and this was in 1985, and they came back regaling me with stories, and I was just enthralled. I began taking Russian classes. I enrolled in an intensive summer language program where I was only allowed to speak Russian. And then when I graduated, the first thing I did was I went to Russia. I'm currently working on a project that is part of a larger series of books about Russia's experiences in World War I and the Revolution. It's called Russia's Great War and Revolution. And so this volume looks at soldiers, but also examines them through the lens of various determinants of their experience, particularly how they experienced being part of the Russian army as members of different ethnic and national or religious groups that weren't necessarily favored by the Tsarist government. We also look at people who aren't always considered to be part of combat experience. Nurses, military priests, railway workers who are right in the middle of combat, who experience the same kinds of dangers and deprivations, and particularly the same kinds of psychological impacts. So all of this is part of this larger project trying to expand our understanding of Russia's experience in World War I and eventually in the Revolution. In the modern periods, states have relied very heavily on the participation of women to wage wars successfully. Even though women are often exposed to the same kind of dangers, they're being bombed, they're being shot at, they're exposed to the same diseases, they suffer the same consequences psychologically with post-traumatic stress disorder. They are denied both the cultural capital that comes along with being glorified by your society, but also the material benefits, which include combat pay and benefits after death. From the very beginnings of even acceptable female roles like nurses, there are people who don't believe that women have a place anywhere near war, and most of them have to do with conceptions of war as being masculine, and that often then translates into the kind of sexual violence that is perpetrated. And this, of course, still resonates in our own society today in the American military. So these are problems that are universal in nature and that we have to continue to address. For me, spending time abroad was one of the most formative experiences of my life. It really changed my entire outlook. I admit to the fact that there were times when I was petrified, but I forced myself to do it, and it was the best thing that I ever did. The CLI program that gives students the opportunities to both have classroom learning experiences, but then to go to the country and use the language is probably the best thing that a student studying language could possibly do.